Hello, Nathaniel Gavronsky here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the history of Valentine's Day. Now, growing up, I actually always thought Valentine's Day was something that Hallmark invented relatively recently to, make a dollar on Hallmark cards and so on and so forth. Well, come to find out, it's actually a much older holiday and dates back to pre-Roman pastoral tribes in Italy. Now, the original holiday that the Romans would have called it before the Christian period was Lupercalia. Now, lupus is the Latin word for wolf, and as you remember from your Roman mythology and Roman history, that Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus, who were nourished from babies by a wolf, and they two together built the city of Rome. Now, this will have some implications into the development of Lupercalia in the very early parts of the holiday, and it was celebrated between the 13th, 14th, and 15th day of Februarius. Now, Februarius gets its name from a fabrua or a fabrum, which is an instrument of purification. Now, the Februarius was also an interesting fact, the shortest month during the Roman calendar as well, even prior to the Julian calendar and to our current Gregorian calendar. It only had 28 days, similar to what the modern month of February has. Now, the term of purification has some later implications on how the holiday and St. Valentine's Day would progress throughout history. Now, the purpose of this holiday was very much similar to what the Celtics had with Samhain, the holiday that eventually becomes Halloween. Basically, there weren't so many like bonfires or such, but it was still kind of the same idea, is that you would have a sacrifice of goats to the priest, and then you'd have these men who would run around naked, dressed up in goat skins, and they would fasten little whips out of the hides of these sacrificial goats, and they would actually whip these women who would stand in line as during the route of the race, and this was for the purpose of purifying them and preparing them for becoming fertile. The whole holiday was about fertilization and wanting a better crop for the upcoming growing season, the pushing back, hiding away the evil spirits, and the getting rid of the darkness of the past year. Also, another one interesting fact is that it has some modern day implications in Central European culture. They still kind of have this. There's the dressing up and all that stuff doesn't really exist anymore because Halloween kind of took that away. But with the exception of it actually being their New Year, it's basically the same as the Celtic Samhain, just at a different time of year. There's chasing away bad spirits. There was hoping for a better crop. There was sacrificial animals to priests. It was pretty much the same thing, just different culture, different time of year, and it's stuck. And even in today's modern European countries, it might not be really well known or really widely celebrated, but in Austria and Germany specifically, they still have some connection to this holiday, and a little bit also in Italy. There was also a tie to the dead being able to come back and forth. So it very much the same type of holiday, just different time of year. Now, some interesting things about this holiday. Again, all of it about being nurture, and with Lupus being a wolf and nurturing the Romulus and Remus into the builders of Rome, it had this connection. But the really weirdest thing about the holiday was that there would be children, specific children, that would choose adults that were to live together for the rest of the year, and they were to be intimate. They were to have children. They were to be together, and this was chosen by a child. And again, this was to spread the gene pool out a little bit, but the fact that this was a kid that chose this and the adults were like, it sounds like a good plan to me, I think is absolutely bonkers. But if you knew what Carthage did to kids, you know what, there's worse things that could possibly happen. All right, so as the Roman Empire develops, the holiday is celebrated and they continue it on. It's not until the Christian times do the implications of the holiday mean change. So where do we get Valentine's Day from? Well, Valentine was actually a very common name in during the third century of the Roman Empire, or the modern era in Rome, and it's Latin for worthy, powerful, strong. And during the third century, there were three Saint Valentines, even though modern day scholars believe that the two of them that were in Italy were actually the same person. There was also one in northern Africa who was also made a martyr. Now, how did Valentine become a martyr? Well, Romans weren't too keen on Christianity, and that's understandable. It was a religion that challenged their religion, and their religion was the seat of their power. And the Saint Valentine was marrying soldiers in order to get away from going to war, and that was a problem for the emperor. And when the emperor questioned him and wanted to know what was going on and why this was taking place, Saint Valentine actually tried to convert the Emperor Claudius II to Christianity, and that really never worked out well for anyone in the Roman Empire up until Constantinople and Constantine. So he was imprisoned in order to be executed. Now, from this point, when he was in prison, he actually befriended the jailer's daughter, and he became really close to her. And when his execution date came up, which happens to be on February 14th out of all dates, he handed a card to the jailer's daughter and saying it from your Valentine. And that was the very first Valentine's Day card. He was then beheaded, and his skull is actually still visible in the city of Rome at a cathedral. So that's kind of the history of who Valentine is and was. Now, it wasn't until the 490s that the Romans decided that they were going to replace some more of their pagan holidays with newer Christian holidays, and the popes did this regularly. I mean, Halloween is basically the eve before All Saints Day, and I did a video about this. And All Halloween was just, All Saints Eve. So St. Patrick's Day, St. Valentine's Day, all the same kind of rules. And so they replaced it with St. Valentine's Day. It becomes the Feast of the Purification, going back to the Februa and the Februm, the instrument of purification, and the whipping of the women who is to purify them, to make them more fertile. So you still kind of get the same thing, just different name. And there was probably fewer people running around naked, hopefully, but it was Italy, so who knows. And that's where you kind of get the name of Valentine's Day, the martyrness of Saint Valentine. And the Romans were desperate to replace the holiday, and this was in the late 496, 494, 496, somewhere in there. But other than that, nothing really changes. The modern legend of St. Valentine and Valentine's Day doesn't really come up until the 14th century with the English literature great of Chaucer. And Chaucer wrote these stories, and one of his great works was The Parliament of Fowls. And in this work, he talks about some of the more modern ideas of tradition with Valentine's, with being love and romance and marriage and love, because he did marry people. It was to get out of going to war, which people do that today, going to college or bone spurs or whatever you want to call it. And then you had the love of the Valentine's Day card and all that. It all rolls into the 14th century, and it progresses through time from that period into the holiday that we celebrate today. I actually think it's really cool that he was killed in 269 by beheading, and just 200 years later we're celebrating him as a holiday. There were other saints and other people that took hundreds or more years for them to be recognized for the good things that they were doing. So that's an interesting thing about Saint Valentine. A couple of things that are attached to Saint Valentine's Day that aren't a part of the original story is Cupid. Cupid also has his history in ancient Roman and Greek mythology. He was originally known as Eros in the ancient Greek, and he was the son of the Greek goddess of love. And in Rome, he was the son of the Roman goddess of love. So he becomes like the god of love. Is one way or another. He was actually a grown teenage boy around 1819. Original depictions, strict jawline, dimples, all the cute stuff. And so for Cupid, he exists kind of almost as a parallel to Saint Valentine and Lupercalia. There's no attachment to the two up until around the 14th century and into the 18th centuries, as they start producing modern day Valentine's Day cards, and they needed something to put down as a kind of a theme. So I mean, St. Patrick's Day had the leprechaun and had the flute and the snakes, and Christmas had its symbols, Halloween had its symbols, but St. Valentine's Day didn't really have anything, so Cupid comes in. Cupid, the story behind Cupid is that he fell in love with Psyche. Now, Cupid's mother disapproved of this marriage, but he married her anyway. Now, Psyche was beyond beautiful, was warned she could never look directly at Cupid. So it was kind of, I think she didn't heed this warning, and she turned on the light one night, because they always had to meet in dark, and I don't know what kind of light switch she flipped, because this was before light, so some type of match or fire, gazed upon Cupid, and Cupid, in order to punish her, left. He just left their castle, left their garden, and walked off. Psyche, who was desperately trying to find the love of her life, went in search of Cupid, coming across the temple of Venus, who is Cupid's mother. And Venus warns her that this is a fool's errand and to not try to chase down Cupid. Well, she persists and persists and persists. So finally, Venus says, "Okay, you follow these tasks. You do these Herculean tasks, basically pretty much straight from the story of Hercules, and you will find what you're looking for." She gives her this box as her final task, and she's to take this into the underworld and to fulfill her last mission. And she curiosity, kills the cat. She decided she was going to open up this box, and this box was nothing but eternal death. And it consumed her, and Cupid, who was meandering around the underworld for some reason, comes across his former lover and felt such a pity and sorrow that he forgave his former lover, garnering the death from her and putting it back into the box and restoring her back to life. And they end up living a happily ever after lifestyle. So only in Greek mythology and Roman mythology could this type of stuff take place. But that's kind of the story of Cupid. He had the powers of a god. He was a little bit mischievous with these. He would confuse and temptate the hearts of the mortals to make them fall in love with unobtainable figures and so on and so forth. It's in Greek mythology and Roman mythology, all the gods were kind of Loki, just not different degrees of being Loki. So the god of love has run over these arrows. He make people fall in love, and if he hits you with an arrow, you fall in love with the next person you see. There's been tons of rip-offs of this. Like there was a movie with a guy who, every time he becomes intimate with the woman, the very next person she meets, she falls in love and marries, and so on and so forth. It's been ripped off a lot, but that's just kind of story of Cupid. He doesn't have any original connection with Valentine's Day, other than the fact that St. Valentine's Day was grouped together by Chaucer as a day of love and romance, and the two just kind of met centuries down the road. So that's basically the story of St. Valentine's Day. It's not a modern holiday at all. For me personally, this was always one of my favorite holidays, because I like to just be randomly nice to people for no reason whatsoever. So in high school, there was a fundraiser, and they were trying to sell these little carnations for this field trip that they were going to do. And they were selling carnations. Red one was for love, pink one was for friendship, and white was for something else. So I bought every single girl that I knew a pink carnation. Now, I knew girls that were the senior class, the junior class, the sophomore class, and me in my freshman class. I knew quite a few of the girls. Not a ladies' man. I just knew a lot of them because I was very sociable, even if I'm awkward in social settings. I tried my darndest. And so I got all these girls carnations. In fact, I would do this every year. Birthdays, Valentine's Day, Christmas. I'll get New Year's, Christmas cards, Valentine's Day cards, birthday cards, anything crazy celebration for them, they got a card, something for me. And so that was kind of why Valentine's Day was such a fun holiday for me. I haven't done anything like this in a long time, as far as kind of spreading the love. In college, I would go buy a bunch of flowers early in the day, like the first person at the floral shop, and I would spend maybe $100-$200 on flowers, and I'd go around my college town and hand out flowers to random women. I didn't ask their names. I just said Happy Valentine's Day. Go into places where girls were working, like bars and pubs, and give them a flower. This one girl actually gave me a hug and held and said, "Oh, called her boyfriend and bitched him out for never getting her a Valentine's Day present." And then back in high school, one of the senior girls that I kind of only vaguely knew, she got really upset with her boyfriend, and she didn't know who I was, but I was walking behind her, and she's, "This little freshman boy named Nathaniel Gavron, he got all these girls flowers, and we've been together since 7th grade." I'm guessing, senior 7th grade, they've been together for a while, and he had never done anything romantic like that for her at all, and so she dumped him in the hallway. And as I was walking by, going down the stairs, it was kind of a funny, sad, but more funny for me, sad for him moment. I just wish I knew who that girl was, because I would have kind of gotten her a flower, because I didn't, because I don't even know her. Yeah, I had to actually know you in high school to get you something. This past Valentine's Day, all the women in the Iowa State Legislature, all the people who were in the Senate and the House are women. I got them all a card. It was an expensive card, and the messages were pretty generic. I just wish you Happy Valentine's Day, but it was just my way to show appreciation for all these women who do sacrifice a lot, as far as spending time away from their family and their kids and their regular jobs to do all this work in the state legislature. And I just wanted to let them know I appreciated all their work and all their sacrifice. And the guys have their days too, like every other day of the year. I personally do think that the guys get the better end of most of these things. But that's just me. But that's the history of Valentine's Day. That's my connection with it. I actually personally like International Women's Day a lot better. It's on March 8th. And it's more widely celebrated across the world outside of the English Commonwealth, because again, Valentine's Day was made popular by the English author Chaucer, so the non-English world kind of created their own through actually communism of all things. So that's Valentine's Day. That's a little bit about Cupid. That's where St. Valentine's comes from, the originality of the holiday. And I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you have any other specific things you want me to do research on or look up or have holiday related connections, please let me know. I'm interested in doing more of these. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all a happy Valentine's Day. Peace.